Habitat in the Philippines has been here for 25 years. Habitat globally is already more than, I think it's now 36 or 35 years old. Now, Habitat is a development organization. Years ago, when I say as late as, or maybe 10 or 15 years ago, you could not imagine Habitat going into disaster response. Because Habitat has always defined itself as a development organization. And when it was founded, our founder, Millard and Linda Fuller, he had a problem with his wife when his wife said, "I'm going to file for a divorce." And the reason is, they were pretty rich, and Millard at the time was only around 30 years old. And his wife Linda said, "Anyway, you don't have time for the family. Maybe it's time to end our marriage." And so Millard reflected, and he went to the Koinonia farm in Georgia and had a retreat with Clarence Jordan, who had a great influence on him theologically. And during that retreat, by the way, before the retreat, Millard already made a decision that his marriage and his family would be worth more than all the money that he has. And so he decided to let go of his money. Of course, he didn't give it away. He just liquidated a lot of his businesses. And then he said, "We are going to start all over again." So he saved his marriage. And so he went to that retreat with Linda, and they were thinking, what are we going to do with our lives? I'm only 30 years old and a lot of money, you know. A nice problem maybe to have. But they were looking at ways in which they can help people. And one of the things that he thought of was, how about shelter? Why not give decent shelter to people? And why? Because he believes that a human being who is created in the image and likeness of God deserves a decent place to live. It's not consistent with what he believes in his faith, God's plan, that somebody who is so beautiful, so loved by God, will be allowed to live in a slum area. And so he thought of what he calls partnership housing. The partnership housing is that rich people would donate some money, then the family, the community, they don't have money but they have labor, they can donate their labor, and he calls it sweat equity. So that partnership together with the volunteers would bring down the cost of the house, and then it makes it affordable, because the one principle that they had was that the poor do not need dole-outs. What they need is opportunity. And so, if what the poor needs opportunities, and then the market is not providing that opportunity, and that's the reason why many people cannot afford to buy a house, then he was trying to find a way to provide that opportunity to the poor. So he called it partnership housing. He tried to test that model in Africa, in Zaire at the time. And then he went back to the U.S., and while on the plane in the U.S., this was the time when the United Nations thought about looking at seriously the problem of homelessness. And that was the time when they had a convention about Habitat. So he was reading that, and he said, "Oh, nice name." So when he landed in the U.S., he registered his NGO called Habitat for Humanity. And that's the reason why UN Habitat is just a nickname for the United Nations Commission for Shelter, because Millard was able to register the name first. And so the next challenge was, how do you popularize it? And so since he was in Georgia, he set up his office in Americus, which is just near Plains, Georgia. He invited former President Carter of the U.S. to help promote the concept of Habitat. And so what are the principles of Habitat? Because these principles define the why. Very lately, Habitat for Humanity International crafted a new strategic plan. We just had our strategic plan, and so they developed a global strategic plan. And when you have an organization which is more than 30 years old, it is a Christian organization. During the crafting of the mission statement, the old mission statement of Habitat, nobody could memorize. And so we're saying, if we have a mission statement which defines what we are supposed to do and nobody could remember it, we have a problem. The vision is clear. And the vision was crafted by Millard when he was interviewed, I think, in CNN. He was asked, what is really your vision? And he said, quickly, a world where everyone has a decent place to live. Okay? Pretty easy to memorize. So his vision was everybody in the world would have a decent place to live. Pretty easy. Okay, what's your mission? As I said, nobody could memorize. And so lately, after so many iterations, they changed it now. And it sounds like this, okay? Seeking to put God's love into action. That's the motivation part. Habitat for humanity. That's who we are. Brings people together. That's the methodology. To build homes, communities, and hope. That's the results that we would like to see. Let me repeat that. Seeking to put God's love into action. That's the motivation. That's the why we do things that we do. We want to put God's love into action. Habitat for Humanity, that's the organization. Then the basic methodology brings people together. Okay? So, consistent with the principle of the partnership. And what are we going to suppose? What are we supposed to do? To build homes, communities, and then ultimately hope. Okay. There was a huge debate on the first part, seeking to put God's love into action. Because as the organization grew, and as a Christian organization in Habitat, we have a principle that we do not discriminate people based on their faith. And so even our staff would be composed of Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, atheists. And so when there was a debate on how to craft the new mission statement. I wouldn't say what continent, but there were a group of atheists within the organization who said that, you know what, that word God is very divisive. I think it's better to just remove that word. Okay? So why don't we just say, seeking to put love into action? Okay? What's wrong with that? Now, it was just good that we still have leaders within the organization who said, but let's go back. Who are we? Who are we? What's the root? If we want to be radical, what's our root as an organization? We are a Christian organization. We were not a secular organization. And the why is very important. Very true. We might be doing exactly the same things as any other organization, but the reason behind what we do is very important. If we remove God, we lose that reason. And so the first win was voted, God stays. And so it is now seeking to put God's love into action. So it was okay. Next is, Habitat used to have 12 mission principles. The mission principles are like the guides, the parameters. And then, if I remember it right, 10 years ago, we reduced it to around 6. Actually, we didn't reduce just that, but we identified, at least the international board, together with the whole staff globally, we said, let's look at that 12. Which among those in the 12 are principles and which are methodologies? Because at that time, they mixed the principles and methodologies. And the reasoning was, we can change methodologies, but we do not change principles. And so out of that, 6 went, because these were methodologies. 6 remained. And then the 6 was reduced to 5, because others were just like repetitions. And so we ended up with 5 mission principles. So what is the mission principle for Habitat? It's not often, because this is a session how, that we are told what to do or how to do it. Rather, we are given a playing field with these basic parameters to play. Okay? What are you going to do? How are you going to run the program? As long as these are the 5 critical principles. Now, as I have said, Habitat is a development organization. We were not into disaster response. years ago. And the reason is, some of the old principles that we had was that, or methodologies, we said, there must be, the principle of a house for a house. The idea is that if Habitat is going to help one family own a house, Habitat must be repaid so that the money can be recycled and used to build another house. And so, if we go to a donor, we tell the donor, you are not helping one family, you are helping many families along the way. So that's one. The other one is that no profit, no interest. Okay, these were the original one. No profit, easy to agree. Okay? No interest. In the US in the beginning, or until now, they give loans at no interest. Our problem was, when you go to the Philippines at the time, when your interest rate was like 8% per annum. We're saying, okay, no profit, we don't argue. But if I have a loan here, payable for 25 years, with zero interest, and the inflation rate is 8%, how can I reconcile that with the principle of a house for a house? Okay? And so, there was an adjustment saying, now we would have an inflation adjustment. So they allowed that. But the other one was more contentious when we go to disaster response. How are we going to reconcile our principle of a house for a house when in a case of disaster, people are in no position to pay? Okay? So that was the question. And so, we reflected, and I go back to the core principles that I mentioned now. The first principle in that is, Habitat's principle is to demonstrate the love and teachings of Jesus Christ. We do what we do because we want to demonstrate the love and teachings of Jesus Christ. Now, when we tried to review again the mission statement, big debate. Because some of our colleagues said, you know what, that word again, that word Christ, is very divisive, especially in Muslim countries. Why don't you just say Jesus? Because that's more acceptable. You know? And good that during the process, we have again a lot of our leaders who were saying, look, Christ is a confession of faith. And the organization confesses that Jesus is the Christ. If we remove Christ, then we are no longer true to the root of this organization when it was founded. We are not out there to talk a lot about Jesus Christ. Our mandate is actually to focus on shelter. That's the second principle. To demonstrate the love of Jesus Christ. Second is focus on shelter. We do, and in the process of doing, and how we do, we hope that in the end, we demonstrate what's that love of Jesus Christ. Okay? The other principles may not fit really with this. But there's another principle of community engagement or involving the community. Now, what's my point here? This whys defines our how. Okay? And so, when we go to the Philippines, and these are the parameters that we work. We are not guided specifically with concrete instructions from headquarters on what we do. But rather, we send our colleagues to the field and we follow the parameters. So, my job here is to tell a story. 2 years ago, that was December, when was that? The Typhoon Sendong, 2011? Okay, December 17, 2011. One night, we were driving. We went to our project site in Calauan, Laguna. Dubs brought his car. He was driving together. And the third guy in that car was Tots Escalada, who is our Chief Operating Officer. And while we were driving, it was a rainy night. We were listening to the radio. And we heard about the devastation in Cagayan de Oro, on how many thousands of people died because of the flash floods. Okay? So right there and then, we said, what are we going to do as a Christian organization? What would Christ do? Because this is the why. If our principle is to demonstrate the love of Jesus Christ, are we going to respond or not? When we make these types of decisions, the thing usually, the most practical thing to do is you decide on the response because you know there's money already available. At that time, there was no money. No money. I joined the organization. I came back to the Philippines only on November of that year. So this was December. This was just a month after I came back. Before that, I was working for 7 years in the Asia Pacific office in Bangkok. Also of Habitat for Humanity. So more or less, I was pretty new. And our decision was, we said, if we are true to our organization, we have to respond. Next is, we have to come out with a number. How many families do we want to serve? Now, we really don't know what was the magnitude of that. And our first number was, we said, 6,000 families. Okay, we now have a response. Call the guys somewhere in Mindanao. His name is Boyet. He was in the Muslim area. Call him. Tell him, get out from your current assignment now. Go to the Cagayan de Oro. Do an assessment. We are going to respond. Our initial target is 6,000 houses. Okay? I think 2 days after, our staff arranged a meeting. Arranged an interview. A national interview with Karen Davila in Channel 2. Okay? During her morning program. That program is always watched by the business community in this country. This is around 7 o'clock in the morning. And so, she was going to interview me to ask about what would be Habitat's response. So, I am on national TV. And so, she asked me questions about Habitat. Easy to answer. I already know Habitat. Are you going to respond? Yes. 6,000, we are going to help 6,000 families. He said, what's your response? And I told her, well, the usual thing that we do is we distribute shelter kits. These are a set of materials, GI sheets, wood, in which people can repair. But we also build core shelters. A core shelter is a basic house. And I said, what's your target? 6,000. And here's the clincher. She asked, how long will it take you to do that? I was not prepared to answer that question. I was not thinking about that question. I already have some ideas on how to do it. Because during the various Asia Pacific Housing Forum, I invited one guy from South Africa. His name is Henny Boats, and he has this technology in which you can build one house per day because he has a formwork, a wall formwork system. You can just pour the concrete, remove it. Every day you will have one house. I did some calculation. I said, if I am going to import like 50 of that or 100 of that, theoretically, I can make maybe 50 houses a day. You know, I was just doing that. Pointed question, right on TV, no commercial. How long will it take you to do that? I said, 6 months. Fernando Zobel de Ayala, okay, who owns Ayala Corporation and Ayala Land, which is the biggest developer, and he is one of our supporters, almost fell from his chair when I said, what is this guy saying? Okay, but I felt 6 months. And I know I had a reason to do that. So when I went back to the office, he said, what have you done? And this is my question to them. I said, we are a Christian organization. If among those who are living now in tents is your child, how long will you wait before you provide that child with a house? Now tell me, are you going to wait for 6 months? Okay. And he said, of course not. I said, that's the difference. Simply because those are faceless and you don't know them, you treat them differently, are you willing to let your family wait for 1 year in that tent? Or 6 months is even long enough. Okay? So I told them, and this is again, the how is defined or influenced by the why. I said, if I will tell you 1 year, you will plan for 1 year. And then we cannot meet our deadline. It will take us 2 years. Okay? If we plan for 6 months, we will do it in maybe 1 year. It's better. And they said, call these people. Okay? Bring them because these are the people whom we can help. And true enough, we announced that. We broke ground, I think, in January. January 20. We broke ground 40 days after the disaster. Okay? And then we turned over 1,000 houses 90 days after the disaster. 90 days from the disaster, we turned over 1,000. Are we done? Well, we are not yet done. The problem is that along the way, there were problems. But what I'm saying is that when we involve in this, for me, a very important thing will be the parameters. It's the reasoning behind it. How? Because your how will always be defined by the reason behind it. Why do we want to build faster? Because if we are a Christian organization, put yourselves in God's shoes. Would you be happy waiting for 2 years? Okay? And then the second thing that we did, and this is where sometimes our board would have a hard time. I have a professional management training. And so when you do a professional management training, you will have the operations plan. Okay? That's my left brain telling me. What I'm happy about the management training that I got was they told me also that my brain has 2 spheres. Okay? There's a left brain and right brain. And the right brain is more of intuitive. Okay? The other one is logical. Okay? And so we were saying that if we are going to do this, and this is a massive one, because do you know what's the budget of that? The budget to do that would be at least 800 million pesos. Okay? 800 million pesos. And months before that, we could hardly pay our rent and our salary. I'm telling you the real story. I was brought back from Bangkok, okay, to help build again the brand or the organization. They told me they could hardly pay their salaries, could hardly pay the rent. And so we told ourselves, okay, let's go for 6,000. And then there's another one that I'd like. I mentioned to the right brain and the intuition and all of that, but I think this is faith. And this is the other principle that we mentioned. And we told them we told our staff, let us leave room for God's miracle. Let us leave room for God's miracle. That's the how. I know that it's not popular when I face my board and say, this is my business plan. And I said, what are the details? Well, I leave room for God's miracle. That would not be popular. But I told them, if there is no place where God can do some miracle, why do I need Him? Right? If everything is under my control, I project everything, well, I don't need Him. Okay? So we said, let's push ourselves to a certain limit where our founder used to tell us that boundary between foolishness and faith, it's just a very small boundary. Maybe it's not yet foolishness, but there's a really faith somewhere there. Okay? And so we decided to go. And very soon, my colleague Dabs will give you the story. But I want to present to you the context. That this is the context we were able to quickly build in Cagayan de Oro. We established offices. Now, let me end with a story, as a little subplot of that. Months later, fast forward, months later, a year after Typhoon Sindong, another typhoon hit Mindanao. And this was Typhoon Pablo. Okay, this was in the eastern part of Mindanao. And when that typhoon hit, we said, okay, now we are going to respond again. But it was already a different story because we already have experience of building a lot of houses, and then we already had volunteers, and we already had what we call implementing partners. Implementing partners are actually either former Habitat affiliates or small contractors whom we have invited to the Habitat fold. We transferred our values and systems to them so that they become our partners. I'll just cut there. When we started Sindong, the government asked us, they said, why don't you go to ARMM, the Autonomous Region of Muslim Mindanao? Because we have 920 daycare centers that could not be implemented because even the engineering brigade cannot implement it. There are no more contractors who would like to do that. The military don't want to do that because these are the most dangerous areas in Maguindanao, Lanao del Sur, Basilan, Sulu, Tawi-Tawi. Over and above that, we would like you to build 2,300 houses for the internally displaced persons. They approached us while we were in the thick of implementing our project in Cagayan de Oro for the Sendong victim. Again, we reflected, what's the call now? Are we going to help them or not? Our attitude was, if there are people who are in need, we will help them. Now, let me tell you the story of Abs. Abs is one of our implementing partners. He is a Muslim. Okay? He operates a lot in Maguindanao. When Typhoon Pablo happened, we told them, we would like to help. And we would like to show to the people there that we care. We will distribute repair kits, but after they receive the materials, we will help them right there and then help them rebuild their houses and repair their houses. To do that, we need skilled workers. And so this guy asked his workers, all Muslims. He told them, we are in Maguindanao. We would like to go to Moncayo, Compostela Valley. I need volunteers. 150 of his carpenters volunteered. Actually, more wanted to go, but he didn't have enough trucks. Okay? So, 150 of them, all Muslims, many of them former combatants of the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, okay, said, we would like to volunteer. So 5 trucks went to Davao City with all of them. They brought food because they have to eat as Muslims. They had their cooks. We went. And we had a long convoy. We went to Compostela Valley. During that day, we distributed, I think, shelter kits for around 1,000 families. And together, by the way, to distribute shelter kits, because we order that, we have to repack it. Okay? When you repack shelter kits, you have to group it per family. So we needed a place which is safe enough to repack. And the only safe place in Compostela Valley was the headquarters of the Philippine Army. And so we went to the camp of the Philippine Army, bringing with us the 150, many of them former combatants of MILF, to help repack. And it is a sight to see all of them, you know, the Muslims, they were sitting there and helping repacking. And then the military was also looking at that. How come that they are not speaking Tagalog or Bisaya? They were speaking the Muslims. And they were helping each other. Okay? And then finally, we went out, distributed together with the military. And then here comes these carpenters. We went to the house. Of course, there may be 3 or 5 of them building in those houses. Muslims helping rebuild Christian houses. And the comment that we had was, oh, how come? Are they Muslims? That's the comment of the Christian family. I said, yes. And they were sharing food. And then after that, we went back very fulfilled. And in the car, our manager in Davao is a Tausug. He is also a Muslim. Okay? I told him his name is Jun. He's a lawyer. I told him, Jun, is this the first time that these people have helped a Christian family? And he said, I think yes. Because it's not our common practice. Many of them live in the Muslim areas. Maybe if they go to a Christian area, it's just in the city. But this is the first time in contact, working directly with the family, helping them. And then I told him, what would be the impact? He said, oh, sir, they're very, very happy. They feel that they are really brothers. And so I told him, if this is not what transformation is all about, I don't know what it is. Because right there, I saw what transformation is. I saw what loving each other is all about. And so, that is just one story, and there are many stories. And maybe let me take this opportunity to introduce my colleague. I said, I will go to the convention. I can just give you the big picture. But a lot of the stories on the how, okay, will be given by my colleague. He is Dabs Liban. So Dabs, come here. He is involved in our projects in Mindanao, both in Sindong and Pablo, and a lot in the autonomous region of Muslim Mindanao. So Dabs, please.